Hey everybody, welcome into the Volquest Mailbag Podcast here on this Thursday morning. I'm Eric Kane with Austin Price, Rob Lewis, and Brent Hubbs. Appreciate you guys for joining us here. As always, like this video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube if you wouldn't care. That helps us out an awful lot. And big thanks to our presenting sponsor, Exterior Home Solutions, who make this possible. For a free estimate, go ahead and give them a call over at 865-524-5888. Got a lot to get into here today. Let's go ahead and hit it running. This is from Vol Fan Attic. Do you think Georgia, Alabama, or Tennessee takes a step backwards after replacing both their starting quarterbacks and OCs? Who will be impacted the most, Austin Price?
Well, it'll be Tennessee. I mean, their roster is not, it's not as deep as the other two. That's not to say the other two can't be affected, but everybody thought Georgia was going to fall back, a year ago after they won the first national title, and all they did was go out and go undefeated and win another one. So, I mean, not to say that Tennessee's going to have this huge drop off, but I mean, Tennessee's got some real key pieces to replace. I think the loss of Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman won't nearly be as felt as the loss of Darnell Wright and some of the other losses. Jerome Carvin, who was just kind of steady Eddie Hubbard. Again, Tennessee's roster is just not where Alabama and Georgia have been. And Tennessee's trying to get there. It's getting better, but it's just not there yet.
Yeah, this goes to the age-old question of X's and O's versus Jimmy's and Joe's when you look at this question, because the one thing Tennessee has going for them compared to the other two schools, Alabama and Georgia, is their identity on offense is clearly defined and clearly cemented. They know exactly what they want to do offensively. Now, do they have all the horses to do it? We'll see. Because Joe Milton's got plenty of talent, but can he play like Hendon Hooker did? Alabama, what are they going to morph into? What are they going to become offensively with Tommy Rees, who nobody at Notre Dame was heartbroken when he left? They may be a little more heartbroken now because they can't seem to hire an offensive coordinator, as they're now interviewing in-house candidates to promote from within. But what do they want to be on offense? Where does Nick Saban want to take them offensively? And then at Georgia, Mike Bobo is a guy that has a reputation, Rob, of not being the most dynamic guy on offense, but he hasn't worked with the talent that they're working with at Georgia, particularly on the offensive line. So it's a little bit of an apples and oranges type thing, because Tennessee wins the category of scheme between those two or three schools, but I don't think they win. They certainly don't win the category of talent at this point.
No, and that's, we talk about it all the time, and that's what it looks like when you've been stacking top 5 recruiting classes on top of one another for, 5 years in Kirby's case, a decade. In Nick's case, I mean, there's just no comparison to roster depth. I mean, Tennessee doesn't have one recruiting class in the last 10 years like Alabama has had every year in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I will say this, though. If Bryce Young's not playing for Alabama, they may have lost 4 games last year.
It's true.
I don't disagree with that at all.
So the question is, what do they have? Because if it's Ty Simpson or whoever it's going to be at the quarterback position, they're going to need more help than Bryce Young did. Bryce Young created and bailed a lot of people out of trouble. Does Alabama have enough help around whoever the quarterback's going to be to take a lot of pressure off of him? Because basically Alabama turned to Bryce Young and said, go win us a football game. And he did more times than not. But, where are they with the rest of the receiver spot? Georgia shouldn't take a step back at all when you look at the receiver transfers they've got in, and a bunch of people wanted a different quarterback instead of Stetson Bennett, right, Eric? I mean, from a talent standpoint, they should be better offensively than they were a year ago.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of college football fans have kind of been wondering why Stetson Bennett's been the starting quarterback when you do have guys in that quarterback room who can throw the ball farther, who can make, sometimes maybe not as good decisions as Stetson Bennett. Maybe that's why he played, but bigger, faster, stronger arm and all that. So from a talent perspective, no doubt, Georgia will get an upgrade at the quarterback position, but Stetson Bennett obviously proved that he was the right guy for the job.
I was going to say he had the moxie, Eric, and just kind of had that it factor. I'm fascinated, and I've been waiting on this quarterback derby at Georgia, and I know we're going to move to the next question. Like, how does it play out? Because you really had 3 5-stars behind the former walk-on Stetson Bennett. Is Carson Beck get the job? He's the oldest of them, the most experienced as far as playing time. Brock Vandergriff, a lot of people expect him to take a huge step than Gunnar Stockton. If no matter who wins it, especially if it's Vandergriff, Carson Beck's not sticking around if Vandergriff wins, and I have a hard time seeing Gunnar Stockton sticking around because I mean, think about how many you're going to be once you kind of get locked in with Vandergriff, you're going to have him for the next couple of years. It's going to be really interesting to kind of see how that plays out.
We'll move on to DMB Vol 1985. Will Tennessee continue to play one Power 5 out-of-conference game in 2024 and beyond? Is that going to continue to be an SEC requirement? Most likely, Brent.
If they go to 9 games, I don't see the SEC making that a requirement. I just think that's too much of an ask for some people. So I don't think you're going to see as many of those games. Will you see a made-for-TV neutral site game to kick off the season? In some places, yeah, I think you'll still see some of those, but I don't think you'll see as many. And remember, too, Rob, with the 12-team playoff, you got a little more wiggle room. You don't have to have one of those now. Florida's got one with Florida State. Kentucky's got one with Louisville. South Carolina's got one with Clemson. But I don't know that a bunch of other schools in the league, Rob, are going to have one of those year in and year out.
No, and I was going to bring that point up, Hubbard. It takes a lot of the risk out of it with the 12-team playoff, and in fact, I would say it eliminates the risk. I mean, I think maybe it doesn't totally eliminate it, but it really mitigates the downside that you have of being worried about taking a non-conference loss. When the playoff just tripled in size. I mean, there's still incentives. I mean, you still might be thinking about getting that bye into the second round or hosting a home game, but I think that took a lot of the downside away and made it at least more palatable for teams to, from Alabama to play USC and in the Jerry Dome or something like that. I just don't think there's as much of a risk involved now. One slip up in August that's going to put you in the bind that it did previously.
Yeah, I think you'll see those types of games, Austin, but I don't know about how many home and homes you're going to see.
I think those are gone.
Where you're going to travel.
I think
Tennessee said that. I mean, they knew that when they set that Washington game up, Hubbard, I mean, they knew this was likely going to 9 games. So, I mean, I think you still see it occasionally, the home and home, but I think that they're few and far between. I mean, I'd say Tennessee will keep Nebraska. That's been on there for a while. And who knows, maybe they try to get, or maybe both schools want to try to get out of that. But, I think that it'll be few and far between. Coaches don't want to do it. I mean, you talk to administrators, and they're the first to say, I know everybody complains about neutral site games, but the coaches are really the ones that love those because it, mitigates, having to go into a hostile environment. I mean, okay. So you make more money. You don't have to go into a hostile environment. Coaches are happy and ADs are happy, but I think fans for the most part would prefer to still have some of those just because it is fun. But I think fans would much rather be in that college football playoff, which ends up getting you some of those type games, whether that's Wisconsin or Boston College or whoever coming here, or Tennessee going to Michigan or, wherever.
Here's the other thing too, Eric, is what does this thing look like after they go through a 9-game conference schedule for a year or so? What is that? Is a coach's viewpoint on it who's like, hey, I would, like Nick Saban said, I want to play 10 conference games. Well, how do you feel after playing 9? When you do that for a year or two, does the thought process on scheduling change any after coaches go through the wear and tear of a 9-game season? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does. I think that's why it's a little bit of flux there for what 27, 28 looks like. And Lord knows the SEC is going to have enough money to get out of any game they want to get out of if they don't want to play them.
But Hubbard, how might have the national championship game played out differently had Georgia not caught the Citadel in Week 10 instead of Texas?
It would have been very different. Just ask Sonny Dykes, right? That was the whole key, is they got that tune-up against the Citadel late.
You talk about a horrible comment to say there. I mean, and you knew it would come back to bite him too, and didn't know it would come back to bite him as bad as it did in the national championship game. But man, of course, he made that a couple of weeks before. I think on the schedule, just my opinion, I think there's no way they continue to mandate an out-of-conference game. When you're adding another conference game, expanding the conference schedule to begin with, I don't see that happening. And again, some schools can pick and choose if they want to continue those end of the season rivalries that we've been talking about, but I don't think it'll be mandated for everybody.
No,
Let's go.
I don't think the league's going to mandate in a 12-game season when 9 number conference games.
Yeah. Let's go to Hoops, I Heart Vols. Rob, how worried should Tennessee be 25 games into the season that there's no rotation for this basketball team? And why wouldn't they get Toby Awaka some significant playing time in the pre-conference schedule to get him ready?
Start with Tobey. I mean, I don't think they knew what they had in Tobey until they went to Maryland. They had to play him 17 minutes, or went to New York to play Maryland, and had to play him 17 minutes out of necessity. I mean, he was good in practice, but I mean, it wasn't like he, just was a kid that demanded, that he get more playing time. And I think that it was an eye opener when they saw him out there. But they liked him more than they thought they would, even back in August. But he's been a pleasant surprise. And as far as the rotation, I mean, the only thing that's not set is, who's getting the most minutes at the 5 every night. I mean, guys know what their roles are. I wouldn't say the rotation isn't set. Guys know how many minutes they're going to get for the most part. And what's going to fluctuate is between Jonas, Tobey, and Urosh, what the matchup looks like, how productive they're being. And, other than, somebody really just having an off night and have their playing time affected, I would disagree. I would not say that the rotation is set, because the minutes are pretty much set and guys know what they're going to expect. What you might see differently is Jonas may come in first one night, or, Tobey may come in first one night, but, Zakai, he knows how much he's going to play. Tyreek Key has a good idea of how much he's going to play off the bench, etc.
Yeah, the only surprise potentially there is Jamal Meshach, right, Rob? And that's been dictated a bit by injury, with guys there, and they've spotted him. Some games played more than others. That's one guy whose minutes seem to be a little bit more on a yo-yo based on matchup, based on how he's practiced that week compared to some other guys on this team. Fair or not fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And also, depends a little bit on the matchups they're seeing. Do they need a bigger guard, out there? Do they want, Jemai out there with Josiah and Julian instead of Tyreek or Santiago because of something defensively? Do they want to give him more run? But I would say that's the only one that really fluctuates outside of the big guys, who I think they fluctuate because they're all inconsistent.
Let's go to Atlanta Vol 1976. Understanding that this is a dead period, do the Vols have momentum with any out-of-state targets? Sure,
they have momentum with a few guys, whether it be Ryan Wingo, Jordan Marshall. I think they have even some momentum with the guys like Kamarion Franklin and Bryce Young. That doesn't mean they're landing them. Like, I think that when those kids took visits to Tennessee, especially Young, Franklin, Wingo's been filling Tennessee going back to the fall. Jordan Marshall, same thing. But when you kind of look at those out-of-state kids, it just feels like Tennessee is in a much better place than they were a month ago with them. That doesn't mean you're landing them or they're committing anytime soon, though. So again, it depends on what kind of momentum you're talking about. Momentum as in trying to get one across the finish line and get a commitment? No. Momentum as in becoming a real force and a real contender for said kids? Absolutely.
And that'll depend on what some guy. I mean, how much momentum you have, to me, depends on which guys come back for spring practice. Who comes back and looks at you on an unofficial visit. I mean, you look at a guy like Jeremiah Beasley that Chad Simmons had a story on Wednesday. He's been here, talk about coming back. He was going to commit in March. He's moved it back to June. Michigan's trying to make a push there. Michigan State's there. Tennessee's there. It feels like Tennessee's got some momentum, Austin, but to really have momentum, they need to get him back for another time. And to me, that will dictate a lot about kind of who some of these out-of-state guys, is it real or is it not real? And part of that will be dictated by, do we see them on campus again sometime this spring or early summer? Absolutely.
A guy like Jaden Riddell, tight end from Missouri. That's another perfect example. He told me he's coming back in the month of March. He was close to committing during the season last year, and if he had, it would probably have been Tennessee. Tennessee has got a lot of momentum with him, but again, getting a kid to pull the trigger, is difficult. There were going to be kids that pulled him in December, they pushed it back. There were going to be kids in February, they pushed him back. I still think they're probably is a pretty good shot that Tennessee ends up getting one before the end of the month. And, but again, it's recruiting, it's fluid. The biggest thing is you want to continue to get all these kids, as Hubs just said, on your campus more and more and more. So you had them in January, you have them again in March, you get them back in for summertime. The more you can get them here, the better chance you have with them.
All right, let's move on now to Volunteer for Life, a baseball question. We've seen articles on the starting lineup. What about the bullpen? How strong do you feel it is? Who will be our closers, middle relief, etc.? By the time that this podcast comes out, my pitching preview should be out there. But in terms of like long relief, I mean, Tennessee's got some really good options. So, Seth Halverson is a guy that can do pretty much any role Tony Vitello, Frank Anderson asked him to do in Tennessee's staff. He can come in and start a game. He's healthy right now. He's throwing hard. He's being confident. Tony Vitello spoke about how he's physically gotten bigger since being on campus. Former Friday night starter in the SEC, and he's healthy. So Seth Halverson is a long relief guy. Camden Sewell is a long relief guy. Of course, we've seen his work. He can be used in a number of different areas. And then Tennessee will have some other options there. Middle relief, those guys can come in there. Kirby Connell, Wyatt Evans, a lot of those guys. And then as far as closers and back end and, Jacob Bimby is another guy. But Andrew Lindsay is a name that we're going to know a lot this baseball season. He's the one that, pitched at Charlotte and then took a year off, pitched in the Appalachian League this past summer. He's here now. He can start if they need him to. He's likely to come in and kind of be a stopper. Really hard-throwing guy. Zach Joyce is another one. Zach he does not throw as hard. He throws more pitches, but he's going to be a guy as well. I think, and of course we'll see how it plays out, guys. I think Tennessee's bullpen is deep. And when I spoke with Tony Vitello, Brent, last week, Tony even said that he feels confident in saying going into a season, this is as deep as they've been in terms of pitchers here while he's been at Tennessee.
Yeah, and Frank Anderson does a good job keeping that staff not only ready, but a little bit off guard, right? So that you have to be ready for any given situation that you're put in. That since he's been here, they haven't always had just the stopper, the guy that they throw the ball to in the ninth inning. They've had it some, but they haven't had it every year that they've been there. I'll be curious to see if somebody emerges as that guy, that the guy that everybody's looking down there in the bullpen in the eighth inning, to see, or the seventh inning to see if he's getting loose because, it's his time on Friday night to close out a game or on Saturday to close out a game. We know Sunday games a lot of times are by committee. Sometimes Tennessee has the good fortune with their starters that they shouldn't be by committee if everybody stays healthy. But do they have that one guy that emerges that they say, okay, ninth inning, close it out, ball's yours, go get it done? Do they develop one of those guys here over the first month of this season? I think that's going to be the fascinating thing about this baseball team, from the bullpen to the outfield to the just the catcher, the whole lineup deal. I mean, Tony Vitello may play a different lineup the first 14 games of the season before he ever figures out what they're going to do, Eric. I mean, he's got a lot of flexibility.
I will say this to Eric's point about Andrew Lindsay. I had a chance to sit down with, Griffin Merritt. I had a chance to sit down with Jared Dickey earlier in the week. And both those guys, they were talking about how they've been rocking the starters. The one guy that they struggle with is Andrew Lindsay. And they were really singing his praises. You go back to Eric's sit down with the three starting pitchers back in the fall. What was the name they brought up? Andrew Lindsay. So to me, that's the one I'm most fascinated to see because everybody, hitters, pitchers, Tony Vitello, keep talking about this one kid. So that's the one I'm most intrigued to see.
Yeah, and it all starts this weekend, starts tomorrow. And last thing on this, and we'll move on. But to Brent's point, and Tony even said this earlier in the week, he was like, we kind of said there's going to be a lot of lineup flexibility and all that last year, but we really knew exactly kind of what that order was going to be. He said the 2 and the 6 hole in the order. Didn't really kind of know at that point, but they knew everything else. He said, truthfully, going into this year, there's so many different options depending on matchups and all that type of stuff to where you could have 3 or 4 different leadoff hitters. I wanted, before the season started, to sit down and kind of make a prediction on, who's going to bat where in the order, but there really is just too many different possibilities, and I think you'll see a lot of that changing over the course of this weekend as well, so we'll have to see. Let's go to CN31, back to basketball. Does Meshach need more minutes down the stretch? I get he is not a consistent offensive player, but at times he has shut down the opposing team's best player. A bit of a give and take there. Allow time for Triple J and Phillips to get completely healthy.
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, he just said it best. I mean, it's a give and take. Some nights you're almost playing 4-on-5 on offense, and I think it depends on who else you have out there with him on offense. I like Jemiah a lot, and I have no problem with playing big minutes, but right now he's really limited offensively. You just see teams, they don't respect him from three at all. I mean, you saw Missouri at least once. I can remember vividly just play off to the point where he had to take one on Saturday, and it wasn't close. And so, I think Jemiah's got a bright future, but I mean, the poster himself said it best. There's just a trade-off offensively right now. But yeah, with the way things are with Josiah and Julian, at the moment, he is going to play a lot.
How would you compare him to Stanley Asumnu as far as offensive games? And that's not, I'm being serious. Like, to me, there's a lot of Stanley Leaper, but probably maybe an inch or two taller than Jemiah. But how would you compare the two?
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, I wouldn't say that they're dissimilar, but I would say Jemiah seems to have a much, much, much better feel for the game than Stanley did. I would think he could get better. And Eric, Stanley Asumnu was a Tennessee basketball player.
Yes, I remember.
In the early 2000s.
Hey, how does this compare? Is he a Udonis Haslem, Miami Heat? I think he's still playing. I don't know.
If you don't remember Udonis Haslem as the doughboy at Florida, then we can't even talk about Udonis Haslem.
I know Haslem as being.
Here's the question. Would you have known that he was a Florida graduate, Eric?
Nope, no chance. I know him as a Heat guy. He's been there since what?
Would you have known that he weighed what? Hubbard, what do you think? 280? 270 at least.
I mean, on a light day, at one point, he was a
low. He did not leave the low post. He did not leave the tape.
That's exactly right.
No, I think I remember. He was there right before Joe Kim, right? Or maybe there was a bit of a crossover. I think I remember that.
There before those teams, yes.
I know Haslem was there in 2006 with the Miami Heat when they won that title, and he's still there.
Eric, what other sport at Tennessee did Stanley Asumnu play?
Did he try to play?
Wide receiver. He practiced at wide receiver. I remember that.
Okay.
There you go. All right.
Woo!
Good job, Eric.
Yeah, it would break the GQ if Jamal Meshach came out for spring practice this year, wouldn't it? That would be the kind of
his basketball eligibility is over, and then he comes back for the fifth year of an extra sport.
Or how about Tobe Owaka comes out for
play
a little defensive end?
Oh, he'd get broke, wouldn't he? He'd have to put on a little bit of weight, right? Play defensive end right now?
Tobe is.
I don't know.
Sick.
Greg Paulus at Duke went and played quarterback at Syracuse. Played 4 years at Duke, went and played quarterback at Syracuse 1 year. He was awful. Let's go to a scheduling question. Nashville 615, SEC 6-3 scheduling question. What are you laughing at?
You're trying to earn your street cred dropping some random sports fact as you roll from one question to the next. Like anybody gives a donkey's rear end about Greg Paulus and Duke and Syracuse.
4-year point guard, and then played quarterback.
I know
he actually happened to be a 5-star quarterback in high school.
That's right.
EC, I don't know if you remember that part.
He was an All-American.
Oh man!
But he played basketball.
That's priceless.
All right, scheduling question. If Kentucky and Vanderbilt rank Tennessee as their number one rival, but they're 4th or 5th for the Vols, how does that work? What if ESPN pushes to preserve Tennessee-Florida over lower-rated historical games?
I think that, here's the fascinating debate is who all has a say, right? Because everybody wants a say at the table, right? Athletic directors, coaches. Does TV have any kind of say? The Greg Sankey has come out and said, we want to preserve, some rivalries, but he has not made a declaration that said we will preserve all of the big rivalries because he also made a statement, you create new rivalries when you change things around. So, again, I would think that they were a good ways down the road in figuring all of this out because this was coming, which is why I think they get there in the spring. But once they get there, Rob, there's going to be what's the Seinfeld, the airing of grievances. There's going to be some public airing of some grievances once they get there because there is no way on the planet you're going to make everybody in this league happy when you think about 2 or 3 years.
December 23rd.
Oh, the airing of grievances?
Yes, December 23rd.
We're going to have a spring version of that in the SEC because there are going to be some hot people. When whatever's done comes out, somebody's not going to be happy.
No, I don't have anything to add other than say I think you're 100% right, and there's going to be multiple somebodies. Heck, there might be 16 somebodies that aren't completely happy. That's probably the best that Greg Sankey can hope for. He's got 16 people that are mildly dissatisfied. Because you're just not going to be able to do it. I mean, it's just, and I think it's going to be fascinating. And I wonder, Hubbard, if there's going to be some language about, permanent, but not really permanent. Let's see how this goes for 5 years. See what the impact has been. See how happy everybody is. See what it looks like for competitive balance.
I got a couple here from Atheron.
It'd be like the TWSAA reshuffling regions every 2 years in high school football in the state of Tennessee. No, this team's good this year. We're gonna move on and we're gonna redo this one and reshuffle that one. I have a hard time seeing the Kentucky-Tennessee one not happen. Austin. I mean, I may be wrong, but I mean that's a big rivalry for Kentucky. Kentucky doesn't have a bunch of big rivalries in this league. I have a hard time seeing Tennessee and Kentucky not play. I could end up being wrong, but that one's hard for me to not see happen.
No, I'm with you, man. I mean, not to interrupt you, I'm with you. I just think ultimately, you've got to find the middle ground for some schools. I mean, if Kentucky doesn't get Tennessee, what are they getting? Missouri, South Carolina is no rival to Kentucky. You're right. I mean, it seems like it's a natural fit to put Tennessee with Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Alabama. Those are, two old school traditional rivalries, and then the third Saturday in October stands alone. So, if they're going to keep Tennessee, Kentucky, they got to bring back the Beer Bear.
And if they do that, I bet Danny White will not say a word in the conference room at test. He might be the one out of 16 that walks out happy because
he's the cat that ate the canary, right, Rob?
I mean, it is a fit. It's the perfect fit for Tennessee, but it is not fair to the rest of the league if Tennessee's catching Vandy and Kentucky every year. I mean, the two are they not? I don't know about. I know Kentucky has had some good years, but historically, the two worst teams in this league probably not close.
They're right there, yeah. I mean, no question. I mean, yeah. I mean, it would be a huge break for Tennessee if that happens. Again, Eric, I think the big question is how focused are they on preserving rivalries? I mean, some of them you have to keep, right? I mean, you're not going to abolish the Egg Bowl or the Iron Bowl. I don't think the third Saturday in October, the world's largest cocktail outdoor, whatever we're calling that thing now, those have to be preserved, right? I mean, the Red River rivalry, you're not going to get away with that one. But what's the number? Is there 5 of those you're going to preserve? 6? Is there 10? I mean, what are you looking at there? I think is the interesting question in this debate.
And Rob's right. Kentucky, very similar to the Niagara Purple Eagles of the Metro Atlantic Athletic Association, where Greg Paulus is the current head coach. They kind of went from a team that didn't have a lot of success to now they're having a little more success, a little over 500, those type things. But at the end of the day, like if Tennessee can do what I was just said and get Kentucky, get Vanderbilt, Alabama's Alabama.
It's the decade of the Vols.
I don't know if it's the decade of the Vols, but you're still at the end of the day, you're still going to play every year some combination of Georgia, Florida, LSU, Auburn, Texas A&M, Texas, Oklahoma. I mean, they get 2 easy ones or easier ones, but you're still going to play a ridiculous schedule that, when you start looking at it on paper, you're like, man, how does anybody go undefeated in this league? That'll be a feat in itself to get undefeated in this league.
Yeah, but AP, can Kentucky keep it up when they lose the spiritual successor to Greg Paulus and Will Levis? I don't know if they can sustain it.
Well, they got to go out. They got to go out and flip it to the North Carolina side of the rivalry. They got to go out and find a Ronald Curry.
But and I'm sure there are multiple examples of this. But if Tennessee catches Vandy and Kentucky as 2 of their 3, and Georgia or Auburn catches Georgia and Alabama as 2 of their 3, and by that logic, Georgia would keep Florida. I mean, if you're like you said, Hubbard, where does it stop?
Right.
Where do you draw the line on? Well, we got to protect these, but this school has 2 of those. This school has 1 of them.
Gonna be
It ain't
interesting.
easy.
By the way, Michael Vick, Ronald Curry in the same class in the state of Virginia. Eric Kane.
That's why the Vols got to get back to recruiting the state of Virginia.
Tidewater's
And hopefully, after seeing Cam Selden in spring practice, Josh Heupel and everybody's like, we ought to get back up there in Virginia a little bit more.
I think if your rivalry game is named, you got to keep it no matter what. Like, that should be the starting point. And I get it. Tennessee Vanderbilt doesn't really have a name. The state championship, maybe, I don't know, but like I mean, it doesn't have a name, but like the egg, iron, beer barrel, all that type of stuff. Like you got to start there. Athron's got a couple here. Thoughts on Mike Bobo to Georgia as offensive coordinator?
Well, Hubs brought this up earlier, and I thought it was a good point. Bobo's never really had the talent that he has, that he will have at Georgia this time around. And so, I'm not going to sit there and knock the hire. Now, at the end of the day, Bobo's always kind of been tied to Will Friend, and Will, who, has struggled to recruit, the offensive line a little bit in recent years. And so I think that's been part of the kind of the hurt with the success, for, Bobo's offenses. So, I think getting away and kind of having, a different set of offensive assistants around you can be a positive for Mike Bobo. So I'm not going to sit there and say that they're not going to be any good on offense, because I think there's going to be so much talent you can overcome that.
They've got to keep going in the trenches, because what in his first run at Georgia, I think I saw this in a story yesterday. He had one draft pick, a 5th round selection on the offensive line during Bobo's tenure as offensive coordinator at Georgia. But now, from a skill position standpoint, you have AJ Green, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Murray, Noshawn Marino, a whole bunch of guys who came through there. He had some skill guys. They weren't physical enough in the line of scrimmage. Georgia's mentality has changed offensively in terms of their physicality and what they want to do since Bobo was there as the OC the last time. So we'll see how it works. I think his first challenge is managing a quarterback room. Todd Monken did a great job managing that quarterback room. I mean, to keep all those guys there while Stetson Bennett was out, the former walk-on being the guy, and to keep all those guys around, he deserves a ton of credit for what he did with that offense that way and managing those quarterbacks. And that'll be the first challenge Bobo has this spring.
Don't you think maybe it was just an example of Kirby Smart? People saying Kirby Smart has won 2 national championships. He just in a row, just went undefeated. He keeps signing top 3 recruiting classes. He could not possibly piss off this Georgia fan base. And Kirby Smart says, "Hold my beer."
Just wait.
Yeah, it wasn't a beloved hire, that's for sure, by the Georgia fans.
But again, he's had the same offensive line coach, a few of the same assistants around him at different stops along the way. That won't be the case here.
Right.
Think about Bobo. Bobo was going to be the OC at Mississippi State 6 weeks ago, and now he's the OC at the defending.
I think we're getting ready to see a great argument for Hubbard's what Hubbard just brought up a little while ago: the Jimmies and Joes versus the X's and O's. I expect Mike Bobo to have a ton of success.
Yeah, because of a lot of Jimmies and Joes.
All right, a few more here from Athron. Here's one on baseball. Vols baseball, the odds-on betting favorite to win the College World Series. Depends on where you look at it. FanDuel, they're second behind LSU. I think you're talking about DraftKings there. Do you like that or not? Target will be on the back all season long. Guys, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it doesn't matter where Tennessee's plays. They're going to find something to make them the underdog. And even when they were atop the polls for, 9-10 weeks last year, I mean, that didn't affect him. I understand how the season ended, of course, but that didn't affect him whatsoever. So I think that they're fine wherever they're at in the rankings, and they're going to find a reason to play hard.
Yeah, and Tennessee could be ranked 128th. They would find a chip on their shoulder, and I promise you they would have a target on their back, because, I mean, they are not the most beloved group of individuals who are walking around the baseball diamond. I promise you Arkansas could care less what their ranking is. Arkansas is not going to be more motivated to play Tennessee because they're a preseason anything. There's a lot of people, would love to beat Tennessee. So they're going to have a target on their back as long as the mentality in this program is where it's at. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I just think that's the way it is.
I think you will see them be more reserved this year because the group of players on this team are different, and they probably are a little more reserved in real life. that doesn't matter. The bat flip from the Grand Slam 3 years ago will still be paying, as far as like the bullseye 3-4 years from now. Like all the guys that were on that team a year ago, talking trash, bat flipping, all that stuff. This current group will be hearing about those guys this year, and they know that. I've talked to those guys about that. They understand that, like, they're going to get everybody's best shot because of how demonstrative they were a year ago.
They also got a new locker room, a revised weight room, and a third-party deck because of those guys as well. So it kind of goes both ways.
And they're going to get a new stadium.
Yeah, and a new stadium. Any early information coming out of winter workouts leading up to spring practice, guys? Anything you're hearing about the workout groups?
I mean, I just continue to hear that, the freshmen, the newcomers that come in have jumped right in, seem to have blended in well, seem to have fit in well. I think you're going to see guys continue to add weight. I mean, I think Elijah Herring looks better. You still hear every day, Austin, Dante Thornton does something, right? And
yeah,
I mean, he's the cat's meow right now that's got everybody's, the buzz on everybody going on both sides of the ball kind of right now. I don't think that's because of he's a workout warrior, just because of his skill set. But, I think this team understands what they're supposed to do. And I think they're pretty good mentality going on right now. And I think they're getting ready for a very competitive spring, which is something we haven't seen here the last couple of years.
You're exactly right. You hit the nail on the head. It's going to be interesting just to kind of see the competition this spring. A lot healthier than they have been, and a lot deeper roster than they've had for those 15 spring practices in a long time.
Well, we got a hoops question here from Sam Smith. How does Tennessee counter Kentucky's plan of making the Tennessee 5 beat them, the center position? Which Tennessee big matches up best with Oscar Tshiebwe?
Personally, I mean, I think if you go back, you wouldn't think so, but if you go back to last year's game at Thompson-Boling Arena when Tennessee routed them, Jonas Adu gave him fits, and Jonas hadn't played. I mean, it was really the first time Jonas played meaningful minutes after Olivier went down. I like that matchup. I like Tobe on him. I think you have to watch out for foul trouble with Tobe out there because of how physical both of them play, and Tshiebwe being a little more savvy about getting away with it. And, a lot was made about Kentucky making Tennessee's 5 beat them. I mean, everybody does that. I mean, John Calipari is not some rocket scientist that figured out that, hey, Santiago and Zakai and Josiah James are better players than Uros Plavsic and Olivier Camois. So, I mean, that's Tennessee fights that every single game. I mean, that's not much more was made of that than should have been.
Yeah, nobody's playing help defense on the Tennessee 5.
Yeah. I mean, nobody's game planning to stop those dudes.
Yeah, I mean, they're not doubling in the post, and so what teams are doing is they're just not leaving shooters. Good defenses are not leaving shooters. Now you had some breakdowns, against Missouri in the second half. They let some perimeter jump shots get away and get some open looks there. But good defenses are just playing it straight up, and they're going to play it straight up the rest of the way because Tennessee's 5, their bigs, can't force anybody to say, hey, we've got to come help, or we've got to double somebody, or we've got to hedge in some way. They don't have to play that way against them, and that's because of the inconsistency of that position. That's why teams are playing them the way John Calipari drew so much praise for playing Tennessee, as Rob mentioned.
And the last time, no coincidence, the last time the 5-man did play well offensively when Olivier against Texas is the last time Tennessee scored over 70 points or 80 plus points until Missouri.
All right, let's get one more. We already told some Gus Manning stories earlier in the week. Already hit on Mike Bobo. Had one from Nashville 615 earlier. Now we have Nashville Vol 615. What does a typical day for a football player look like right now for this month in terms of meetings, workouts, etc.? Guys, I know it depends on the day, but typically kind of what's a day look like for them?
Well, those guys right now, I mean, it's workouts. It's heavy workout stuff, morning workouts for those guys because their class schedule, they go to school in the afternoon. So it's morning workouts. A lot of times they come back in the evening and can do some meetings. There's some limitations on some of the time that you can spend, but the NCAA did relax that a few years ago and allow coaches to have more meetings with them. But a lot of these guys are watching film on their own or they're watching as groups. with offensive analysts, defensive analysts. In addition to working with coaches. Coaches can be present at workouts. And then you're trying to make sure you stay on top of your school. This is a big semester. I mean, you got 15 practices in there, Austin, but this is a semester a lot of guys are taking harder electives or harder classes in their major right now because you don't put that burden on them in the fall when you're in the midst of the 20-hour rule and get ready for games each and every week. So I'm not saying football takes a back seat, but your balance is a little different in the spring than it is the fall academically.
Yeah, no doubt. And so, with all that, knowing all that, it's a tougher juggle for kids. And so if you're trying to get into your major and you've got some tougher classes, and you're also trying to find a way to get into, the starting rotation at your position, it's a pressure packed month and a half.
All right. I think we emptied the mailbag at the time of this recording, so job well done to us. Appreciate you guys for sending in those questions as you do each and every week. Rob Lewis, Austin Price, Brent Hubbs. I am Eric Kane.
And Ronald Curry.
Yeah. And Greg Paulus.
And everybody else we mentioned here on today's show. Hey, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like this video. It helps us get out there to more Tennessee fans. Subscribe to the channel. That helps us out tremendously, so we appreciate that. And as always, big thanks to our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions who make this podcast possible. You guys can get a free estimate by giving them a call at 865-524-5888. Give them a call today. For the guys here on the Volquest podcast, appreciate you guys, and we'll see you on Tuesday for another edition of the VQ Pod.